Did you know that in the 1950s, owning a bicycle in India was a symbol of success? Or that a simple kerosene lamp could bring an entire family together under one roof every night? Those were different times. When life moved more slowly, money was worth less, but values were worth more. Newly independent India was breathing hope. The streets were full of open-air markets. Wrappings were made of leaves, and the sound of the train was a familiar melody that connected entire villages. People worked with their hands, but also with their hearts. In this video, I invite you on a nostalgic journey through 1950s India, a nation that was beginning to dream, building its future with faith and simplicity. We will discover 20 unforgettable things from that era, from life without electricity to pure festivals, the value of bartering and the spirit of community, fragments of a country that no longer exists but still lives on in the memories of those who loved it. 1. The rupee at the price of the dollar. Can you imagine an India where 1 rupee was worth the same as $1? In the 1950s, that was a reality. The young nation had no foreign debt, and its currency reflected an economy that was clean, hopeful, and sovereign. This monetary equality was not only a financial symbol, but also a moral one. It represented a country that was starting from scratch with pride and the dream of rising up through its own efforts. Each banknote had a value beyond the economic. It was a reflection of a people determined to believe in themselves. Families saved patiently, not out of fear, but out of respect for work. Abundance was not the goal, dignity was. And in that modest but purposeful life, a generation was born that discovered the purest wealth, that of living with little and feeling complete. 2. The simple, self-sufficient life. What was it like to live with just enough, but have everything? The houses were small, but the souls of their inhabitants were immense. The courtyards smelled of home-cooked food. The doors were always open to neighbors, and the word sharing had a profound meaning. Food came from the garden or the local market. There were no supermarkets, but there was an abundance of authentic flavors. The aroma of freshly baked bread and fresh fruit from the countryside. There was no rush, no noise from engines, no anxiety about the future. People found joy in everyday life, in a shared glass of tea, in a conversation under the sun, or in the sound of the monsoon beating on the tin roof. It was an India without luxury, but with time, without abundance, but with meaning. A nation built with clean hands and united hearts. And although wages were small, there was a pride that shone brighter than gold. 3. Modest wages, but with pride. What good is earning more if the value of work is lost? In the 1950s, a government employee could earn as little as 55 rupees a month. Today, that figure seems minimal, but back then, it represented something much greater. Stability, responsibility, and respect. Every rupee earned was the result of genuine effort. Men walked miles to get to work, and women managed every coin with ingenuity and love. There was no excess, but neither was there despair. Civil servants were seen as builders of the new country. They worked with conviction, not ambition, and in every modest salary lay a promise to contribute to something greater than oneself. That quiet dignity was the backbone of the newly born nation. And in the midst of that life measured by sacrifice, one sound united millions of people, day and night. The radio. 4. Radio, the sounding soul of the nation. A single radio could bring an entire neighborhood together. Before television, before the telephone, India listened. The voices that came out of the small wooden device were familiar, warm, and full of emotion. Binaka Gate Mala, broadcast by All India Radio, was more than a program. It was a national ritual. The songs of Lata Mangeshkar, Kishore Kumar, and Mukesh traveled through those waves, and with them, the dreams of millions. The news was listened to with respect. the advertisements with curiosity, and the music with devotion. It was a time when listening was an act of unity, not distraction. The radio not only informed, it accompanied. It set the pace of daily life from dawn to quiet evenings when the family gathered around it. And when words were not enough, feelings crossed the country in another way, with ink and patience. 5. Letters, the heart of the past. Who has not waited for a letter with bated breath? In the 1950s, writing was a way of loving. Letters were promises, confessions, and hopes that crossed mountains, rains, and seasons. The postman was a messenger of destinies. He brought laughter, news, and sometimes tears. Families awaited his arrival as if waiting for a miracle. Each envelope had a soul. The yellowed paper, the smudged ink, the carefully affixed stamp. There were no emojis, but there were real emotions. Words were chosen calmly, knowing that they would take weeks to arrive. Letters were kept in chests, read 1,000 times, perfumed with memories. They were the internet of emotion, the social network of patience. 6. An India without noise or haste. In the 1950s, India was a country where time moved slowly. Cities were still small, traffic was sparse, and days had their own rhythm. The streets of Delhi, Mumbai, and Kolkata were filled with bicycles, carts, and a few Morris or Ambassador cars. Children played barefoot, vendors shouted cheerfully, and evenings ended with the smell of boiling chai. There were no horns, no screens, no chaos that defines urban life today. The nights were quiet. The sky showed more stars than antennas. Pollution was almost non-existent. There were few factories, and trees abounded. Breathing was a clean, natural act. That India, slow and serene, had something we have forgotten: shared silence, space to think, and the calm to observe the world without haste. And in the midst of that serenity, an art form flourished as never before: cinema. 7. The golden age of Indian cinema. It was in the 1950s that cinema became the mirror of the nation. Bombay, not yet called Mumbai, was experiencing its golden age. Raj Kapoor, Nagis, Dilip Kumar, and Madhubala filled theatres with dreams and tears. Films such as Awara, Mother India, and Shri 420 were not just entertainment, they were moral tales, symbols of hope, reflections of a country searching for its identity. The music, composed by legends such as Shankar Jaikishan and Naushad, became the soul of the people. The lyrics spoke of love, justice, sacrifice, and redemption. The cinemas were always full, not out of luxury, but out of emotional necessity. It was the place where the poor and the rich shared the same story, where for a few hours everyone was equal. Cinema taught people to dream, and its light shone beyond the screen, in the way people dressed, loved, and imagined. And while movies were winning hearts, another quiet change was beginning to emerge in the lives of women. 8. The women who began to change everything. In the 1950s, India was still a traditional society. Most women led domestic lives, but something was awakening. Inspired by leaders such as Vijaya Lakshmi Pandit, the first female president of the UN General Assembly, and Sarojini Naidu, poet and activist, many young women began to study, write, and participate in politics. Women's access to education was slowly expanding, especially in large cities. In 1951, only 1 in 10 women could read, but the number was growing every year. New female faces were also appearing in art and cinema, challenging the norms. Nargis, Meena Kumari, and Nutan portrayed strong, sensitive, and human women. It was a silent revolution, made up of books, songs, and courage. Women began to occupy public spaces, demand a voice, and build a new type of Indian femininity: educated, free, and brave. This cultural transformation coincided with another source of national unity: travel. 9. trains that united hearts. In the 1950s, India's railway network was one of the largest in the world, but it still retained the charm of the 19th century. The trains moved slowly, leaving behind a metallic echo that mingled with the singing of the villagers. The compartments were simple, without air conditioning, with wooden benches and the constant murmur of conversation. People shared food, stories, tea, and songs. The train was a place where social differences were erased. A farmer could sit next to a teacher, a soldier next to a poet. More than just transportation, it was a stage for humanity. Farewells on the platforms, samosa vendors running between cars, families carrying dreams and luggage in equal measure. In an India where cars were a luxury and roads were scarce, trains were arteries of life. Each journey was an adventure, a symbol of connection between cultures, languages, and religions. And when he arrived at his destination, another dream awaited him: education. 10. Education, the seed of the future. Can a nation be reborn through education? India in the 1950s believed it could. Only 18% of the population could read, and leaders understood that literacy would be the key to progress. Under the government of Jawaharlal Nehru, institutions such as the Indian Institute of Technology, IIT, and the University Grants Commission, UGC, were created, laying the foundations for modern education. In cities, schools began to multiply, and English became established as the language of instruction, opening a door to global knowledge. In villages, teachers taught under trees with makeshift blackboards and an enthusiasm that was worth more than resources. Education was seen as a sacred act. Parents, being poor, made enormous sacrifices so that their children could study. That spirit of believing that knowledge can liberate was the driving force that propelled India to transform itself from an agricultural nation to a scientific powerhouse in just a few decades. And while schools illuminated the future, the country continued to preserve traditions that kept its soul alive. 11. The old currency, annas and pice. Before the modern rupee reigned supreme, Indian pockets held small pieces of history called annas and pice. These were copper and nickel coins that jingled in markets and in the pockets of millions of people. 8 annas made half a rupee and 16 made a whole one. For children of that era, collecting a few annas was enough to buy sweets, a glass of sweet milk, or even a ticket to a black and white movie. Those were times when money had real weight, not only in its value, but in its feel, its metallic sound, its daily presence. Many still remember the design of the piece, with its hole in the center, a symbol of an India that balanced the practical and the symbolic. Those coins officially disappeared in 1957 when the country adopted the decimal system, but their echo continues to resonate in the memory of those who used them to build their first dreams. 12. The purest and most local festivals that will never return. Before LED lights, advertising campaigns, and televised festivals, India celebrated with soul. The festivals of the 1950s were communal, intimate, and deeply human. On Diwali, families gathered to make their own clay lamps, and the streets were lit with a warm glow that came not from electricity, but from their hands. During Holi, the colors were natural, made from dried flowers and spices, and there were no filters or photographs, just laughter filling the air. In villages, local festivals celebrated harvests, rain, or the arrival of the monsoon, and each region had its own version of joy. In many of these places, there was no money involved, only exchange, music, and community. It was a spirituality that was lived more with the heart than with temples. This was the India of festivals. Less spectacle, more feeling. 13. Houses without electricity, but full of stories. In the 1950s, electricity was a luxury reserved for the largest cities. In villages, nights were lit by kerosene lamps and families gathered around the fire or under the starry sky. The walls were made of mud, cool in summer and warm in winter, and the thatched roofs let in the whisper of the wind. Life was simple, yes, but also deeply shared. Neighbors knew each other by name, and children played until the last ray of sunlight disappeared. There were no screens, but there were stories, songs, and tales, passed down from generation to generation. Grandmothers told legends while preparing chapatis on the chulha, and children dreamed of the heroes of those stories. Today, electric lights illuminate every corner of the country, but some say the darkness so full of life was never felt again. 14. The pride of independence still fresh. Only a few years had passed since 1947, and independence was still in the air. The tricolor flag was not a decorative symbol, it was a promise fulfilled. Every Independence Day dawn was celebrated with tears, with respect, with a silence that weighed more than any speech. Adults remembered the sacrifices, and children learned to look at that flag with pride, not as an object, but as a living history. Schools organized marches, towns raised their own flags, and the anthem was sung with an emotion that few today can imagine. In cities, seeing the flag flying above government buildings was an almost sacred sight. There was not so much protocol, but there was genuine fervor, that of a country still discovering what it meant to be free. 15. Bartering is part of the economy. Money was already circulating normally, and bartering remained a common practice, especially in rural areas. But these were not just small exchanges. In 1950s, India, there were large-scale transactions made without a single rupee. Farmers exchanged tons of rice for livestock, merchants exchanged silk fabrics for valuable spices, and even entire villages negotiated products with each other, building local economies based on trust. In certain regions, a marriage could be agreed upon through the bartering of land or family jewelry, without contracts or intermediaries. It was a vibrant, flexible economy, woven together with words and honor. 16. Life before consumerism. There was a time when owning a watch was a symbol of respect. In the 1950s, a fan in the home was synonymous with prosperity, and a bicycle, a jewel on wheels. Life did not revolve around accumulating things, but rather around taking care of the few things one had. Objects were repaired, not replaced. Tailors mended clothes until they were as good as new. Shoemakers repaired worn-out sandals, and a radio in the living room brought the whole family together to listen to the news or music programs. Consumption did not define happiness. It was usefulness and durability that determined the value of things. There was a beauty in simplicity, an elegance without ostentation. India at that time did not compete to show off, but to share. And every object had a story, a memory, a meaning. That was the true wealth of those days. 17. Everyday spirituality. In 1950s India, spirituality was not sold. It was lived. Temples were not tourist attractions. They were the heart of the neighborhood. Dawn prayers, the sound of bells, incense wafting through the streets. It was all part of the daily rhythm. People did not go to the temple to be seen, but to find calm. Every home had its own small altar, where families lit a lamp and offered flowers before starting the day. Religious festivals did not depend on sponsors or cameras, but on the genuine faith of the community. Today, many of these practices have become spectacle, entertainment, business. But in the 1950s, spirituality was a way of life, not a way of showing off. It was the invisible force that sustained homes, marriages, and entire communities. 18. Streets without plastic or smog. Imagine walking down an Indian street without the noise of engines, without the grey smoke of traffic, without the crunch of plastic underfoot. That's what cities and towns in India were like in the 1950s. Wrappers were made of banana leaves or paper. Cups were made of clay, which, after use, was simply returned to the earth. and open-air markets were true temples of color and aroma. Fruit, spices, flowers, everything was fresh and local. The air smelled of rain, incense, and damp earth. Bicycles and rickshaws set the pace of the city, and pedestrians walked without fear of modern chaos. There was no rush of mass consumption or the waste left behind by misunderstood progress. It was a greener, cleaner, more vibrant India. A country that breathed without filters or masks, and where nature was not a luxury, but just another neighbor. 19. The role of the community. In that India, the word neighborhood meant extended family. If someone fell ill, everyone helped. Some cooked, others took care of the children, and others simply kept them company. Weddings were not spectacles of opulence, but collective celebrations. The whole village contributed something. One person provided the music, another the flowers, another the hands to cook. No one was left out. That unity was the true social fabric that held the country together. There wasn't as much money, but there was something more valuable in abundance: empathy. Today, modern India struggles with competition, ego, and family envy. And often, success is measured in comparison, not connection. But in the 1950s, smiles were shared, as were problems. Happiness was not individual, it was communal. And that, more than any advancement, was what gave meaning to everyday life. 20. The spirit that cannot be copied. Times were tough, yes, but 1950s, India had something that no country in the world has managed to copy: its spirit. Hope was a daily act. Patience was a virtue that was breathed. Faith was a force that moved mountains. The country was rebuilding itself from the ashes with little money but boundless energy. Young people dreamed of studying, farmers dreamed of seeing their crops grow, and artisans dreamed of teaching their craft to their children. The conveniences of today did not exist, but there was a sense of purpose. People worked with their hands, but also with their hearts. And although progress brought comfort, it took something else away: that invisible bond between sacrifice and hope. That is why we leave this point to the end. Because that spirit, the spirit of the men and women who built a nation with nothing but faith, is what keeps India's identity alive, even today. Everything else changed: the currency, the streets, the temples, the customs. But that inner flame, that mixture of humility and greatness, remains the purest essence of the India that was, and that should never be forgotten. This was the India that time could not erase. A simple, strong nation full of soul, where a watch was a treasure, faith was authentic, and the streets breathed life without plastic or haste. Perhaps today the world shines brighter, but it no longer illuminates in the same way. That India of hope, community, and unbreakable spirit lives on only in memories and in the hearts that still miss it. That's all for today's journey through memory. Like it if it brought back memories, and don't forget to subscribe for more informative nostalgia.